Well, gang, this is the fun part now. This is the assembly now of all my reconditioned parts and all my new parts, and finishing the initial finishing of this bike. Why I say initials because even after you attach everything and adjust everything, a bike isn't really roadworthy until you actually test everything under load. You're braking and shifting. So even after I assemble all the components on the frame and initially, size the chain and try to adjust the shifting and braking, it isn't really safe to ride until you actually road test it, because things are a little bit different when you're actually under load riding the bike. So another thing I'm doing too, and I think I'm going to do this for all my rebuild projects, whether I want to sell a bike or not, is I take one of my film cameras and I've been documenting. I'm going to document the assembly. I've also taken pictures of the parts that I bought. So say down the road, if you want to sell a bike, you can prove that that you bought these parts and that you've rebuilt the bike, showed it, you documented the whole process, and that might be a good idea if you buy bikes, whether you plan on selling them that way. There's a lot of people who buy a bike for very little money and then they do very little to it and then they flip it and they think they're for a profit. I'm not for or against that, but if you want to buy a bike and they're asking serious money for it, why should you just give them pure profit if they found it for like $20 or something and they did a couple superficial things like maybe wrapped some new handlebar tape on it and then they mark it up to like $180 or something. That, to me, that's, you're not really getting what you're paying for. But that's kind of a little side issue here. But like I said, I'm ready to start the assembly, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say what I'm going to do, and then I'll do it off camera. Then I'll do another scene and show you how it went, and then I'll do it. Then I'll keep going step by step, and hopefully, without this video being too long, you'll see it go from this bare frame to a completed bike. So with that, no further ado, I'll show you what I'm going to do initially here. I went to a shop too and I decided to buy new cable housings. I was going to use these old ones, but I thought, I don't know, I better use new ones. It'd just be better, I think, since I'm using new cables. But initially, all the components that bolt onto the frame I'm gonna attach. I'm gonna snug them on. But like I said, I'm not gonna tighten things thoroughly until everything's kind of like calibrated, like the brakes to the wheels and things like that. The first thing, the most important critical thing, are the bearings, the bottom bracket, and the headset. These are the headset. I'm going to grease this stuff and attach it, and then attach the crank. Not going to show this in detail. There's other videos you can watch on YouTube that people have done this in detail. But these are like the most critical thing. You want to do this, and you want to do this right, because if you don't tighten things enough and you keep going with the assembly process, you end up having to take everything back apart to redo it. So that's going to be the first things I do. Before I put the crank on, I want to show you and want you to hear something. Many people who work on bikes, they don't use bicycle specific grease. They'll use like lithium grease, or somebody I watched videos uses something called marine grease. And reason why I use bike specific grease is it's synthetic, so it's supposedly not gonna break down in time and be turned into like a varnish if you don't regularly, every maybe 2, 3, 4 years redo this. But when you, even if you install this correctly with that kind of spike specific grease, see, I have this. I'm pretty confident this is how it should be, but it kind of sounds like there's no grease, but there really is. It's because the characteristics of that grease are a lot different than the much thicker automotive grease. You could do this in you wouldn't hear that, what sounds like metal on metal. When I have the crank on here and when I ride this bike, you're really not going to hear that. You hear it now, but that I still have plenty of grease in there. I mean, that's normal for that kind of grease. Okay, I didn't say this in my previous prelude, I guess, to this scene, but I also did the front fork, and I initially snugged all this together. Now I may have to tighten this better later when I have the wheel on. But I wanted to kind of show you this, or explain this in a little detail, because this is like by far the most important things to pay attention to when you're building a bike back up from a frame. Okay, with the crank on, and there's no play, there's nothing, no weird noises, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. Should work easily like that. Like I said, no play. Tighten these. Some people, when they rebuild a bike, they'll take a hammer or like a mallet and they'll bang this on. I really don't think that's necessary with one of these square axles. I just tighten it on, and it just tightens itself on as far as it's supposed to go, and I'm happy with that. So that's the crank. Okay, as you can see, I got the front derailleur. I pretty much snugged it on. I had like some little marks on the frame where it used to be, so that was pretty easy for me, just putting it back on and lining it up with the crank teeth there. Pretty much permanently tightened on, reattached the rear, snugged on the front and rear calipers here. So now the next step is I'm going to put my new brake shoes. I'm going to just kind of loosely put them on, and then I'm going to put the wheels on, and then I'm going to try to line up the shoes to where they're going to contact the rims, and then I'll initially tighten the brake shoes there. Okay, it's actually starting to look like a bike now. Like I told you, I put the brake pads on, snugged them on, and I kind of initially calibrated them when I push them together so that they're going to contact the rim in the right place. And of course, I haven't run the cables and tightened anything yet, but they're going to come together. When they do come together, they should stay. Same thing with the front. You can see that. See? Both sides. And I may tighten this now. I may tighten this now if I have it approximately where I want it, or I may just leave it. I think I'm going to leave it for the time being. But now I'm going to put on the handlebar and try to line it up and tighten the stem. I'm still not going to completely tighten this, because the best way to make sure that this is right is that you would have the brakes and everything attached. You would have the bike on the ground. You would roll the bike back and forth and apply the brakes. And then when you apply the brakes, you'll notice if there's any looseness in your headset. You'll sense if there's anything moving. You don't want that, but at the same time you want this to move
freely, especially when you, it's moving freely now, but you got to remember it's hanging, the weight is hanging down. Now when it's on the ground, everything's going to be pushed back up, so you may have some free play up here that you'll have to compensate and retighten for. So now I'm going, like I said, I'm going to attach the handlebar now. Okay, as you can see, I have the handlebars on. I approximately line them up. I kind of snugged this on. I didn't really super tighten it yet. I found out I want to have it relatively high. There is a mark just under here for like the maximum height. I also adjusted this because I want the bars to be pretty much parallel with the top two with the frame. That's pretty much like the standard orientation for just kind of a handlebar. In fact, I may even put it up, maybe up just a little bit more though. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to initially attach the chain. It's one of those Schwinn kind of chains that has that simple kind of link, snap-on link. And as far as the length goes, I'm gonna try for the regular length. It should be. If it's a little tad too long, I'll live with that. I usually don't need to shorten the chain. But after I initially attach the chain, I'm gonna run my gear cables, and this is naturally gonna find its way, you know, according to the length of the chain. And but after I initially run the gear cables through to the front and the back, then I can get an idea. When I shift it, I'll adjust the calibration to the teeth, and I get an idea how long, if the chain is the right length. Another thing, when you put a chain on it, when you take it out of the packaging, it usually has a kind of protectant oil. That's not, you should really get rid of that later, because that's not really meant for riding. That's just a preservative. But for the time being, I'm going to leave it on, so I get an idea if that's the right length and everything, and if the shifting, my initial shifting is going to be good. Okay, as you can see, I've run the gear cables, and when I size the chain, I ended up taking about this many links out. And being this is a Schwinn chain, I have that. Where's that link? Maybe you can see it. If I can. It's that kind of link that you kind of like, where it snaps. You pull it apart and it engages. It kind of snaps and connects the chain. My initial calibration of the shifting is pretty good. I cut a new casing here too. The cable casings I got, here's the old one, by the way. It has the metal ends that you would have to crimp on. These are different. They have these they're like a kind of a hard, I don't know if they're metal or plastic or whatever, but you just kind of push them on and they stay on. You don't have to like crimp them. And I cut it to the same length, but maybe I can hold the camera and I can kind of show you the shifting. See, it's pretty much calibrated to the click stops of this, although you can turn this and just do it friction too. The front is working pretty well. The only one thing I noticed about these cables I bought, they didn't come with any kind of those little metal caps that you can crimp on. So what I did is I just took some electrical tape and I kind of taped over the ends, so hopefully they won't start to fray there. So, but this is pretty good for now. Like I said, this still has this kind of this waxy preservative on here, and probably when I'm initially done, I'll clean that off and I'll lubricate it with a regular riding lubricant there. So that's where we stand. Now I'm gonna work on the brakes. I'm going to cut some new casings there, and it might be tricky. I have to route it through the frame here. This is the old one, and I think there's a method of doing that that I can't recall right now. But that's the next step then, is setting up the brakes, connecting them, and then I'm gonna I have a tool for kind of clamping this together while I tighten this. Like I said, as you can see, like with the gears I've already done, I'm pretty happy with the tightening. I'm pretty happy with the setup. I could fine tune this a little bit later with the set screws, but that's pretty much done right there. Okay, as you can see, I've done the brake cables and the brakes. To do that, you basically run the I basically cut the well, I don't know what you call them, the casings from the old casings, which I took out, and to run a new casing through the frame, because it's got these inlets, it actually goes through the tube. I cut the I cut the new casing to the length of the old one. Then I ran my new wire through the old one and then through the new one, and then I kind of pulled everything through so that the new casing would snake its way through. And then for the adjustment of the brakes, you basically, I have a tool, and I recommend anybody who works on bikes, you probably have this tool. This clamps the shoes together, and then you can run your inner cable out. You approximately tighten it, and then you adjust whatever kind of style barrel adjuster you have for the gap, and then you can tighten your shoes too. And then at the very end, you also tighten, if you have it. I mean, you snug this on, or at least I've snugged this on before, but then for a final tightening, pretty much you can retighten that. But I recommend take your time when you do this so that you do it right. And when you do it right, you'll have like the right gap. You don't want too big of a gap, because you don't want too much travel. You want maybe like 3/4 of an inch before your brakes actually engage. And I'll just show you real quick here. See that? It should be a real good, and it should be even, and the gap should be even, and that applies to the other side. The other side is a little more, because of the length of the cable, usually end up having a little more stretch to the cable. I mean, I have a little more travel here before it really engages. That's because of the length of the cable. Maybe I can show you real quick here. See? And the back is pretty much the same. It's everything's centered and tightened. I said the last thing I do is I retighten these, and then I retighten that rear mounting. Now after that, I'm gonna do what I hope is my final tightening of this, and I'm gonna take this off the stand, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, for your adjustments, if you have those open kind of bearing style headset, to tighten everything, you want to adjust it so that you can kind of test it with the brakes. What I do, and I think most books recommend this too, you want to roll your bike and then apply the brakes. Of course, your brakes, you know, that's why you do the brakes first before you do the final adjustment, or hopefully the final adjustment on the headset. Roll the bike and then apply the front brake, and if you can tell if it's still loose, if there's any kind of like play, any kind of looseness or whatever. So you want to snug tighten this until you don't have that, but at the same time you don't want to get it too tight so that this has any kind of resistance either. And then after that, you can tighten your stem. Make sure your handlebars are perpendicular to your frame and your wheel there. So So that's kind of a critical thing to do, or to remember to do. Nice thing about having a collection of bikes is when you get a better bike, you can switch components to that bike. I've shown this bike. This was a former project, and I took this seat, which is a much better seat, I took off of this bike, and I'm putting this seat. This is still a really nice seat, but it's vinyl. And I took the pedals off this one, which are these, and I'm going to put them on the Paramount. And then these other pedals, I've had these for a while. I'm going to put these back on this this World Sport. And I kind of rejuvenated this old computer. I put a battery in it. It works. I'm gonna put it's got the this magnet. I found some other magnets too at a bike shop that this other computer I'm gonna put on another bike. But you can make even something like this if you're obsessive like I am, and you like things to make things look like nice and halfway decent again. You can rub out, marks and scratches with something like this rubbing compound, and then make the plastic look new again with Armor All, and then put this on. But the last shots I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put the bar tape on. I'm gonna put this reflector on the seat post, because that's kind of a safety thing. Install the computer. Maybe I'll show you this little beam rack, which is kind of nice. It's like that kind of a trunk system that you can slide a Topeak rack trunk on a bike like this, which is basically like a sport road bike, but you can still make it a little more practical by putting some way of carrying a bag on there. So that's going to be like the last scenes of this video. Well, gang, as far as I'm going, the assembly of this bike is done. I still have to do some lubrication, and over the making of this video, we had our first snow of the winter. It's November 16th here, so I'm not going to be road testing this bike immediately. As you can see, I've got the bar tape. I installed the original computer. This is like a early 1980s computer. Rear view mirror. Interesting about the computer, I wasn't able to use the original wheel magnet because these kind of racing wheels have a different kind of spoke pattern, and the original magnet, I couldn't really place it in the right area. So luckily the other day I bought some of these kind of magnets. They're kind of they're more for a modern computer, but a magnet is a magnet, and I was able to put it in such an area that it was compatible with this older computer sensor. And I'll kind of show you. See, you're seeing it read out. And I didn't specifically buy this for this bike, but this is going to be a nice accessory. I can use this on two other bikes, in fact, that I don't have dropouts for a rack. In fact, this is really meant to be as a sport bike or a racing bike, but to me it's a lot more practical with some kind of a rack that I can carry on my little trunk with the basics for going on like a long trip or a day trip or something. And I got this seat I took off my other bike. It's a really great premium seat, and I recommend investing in a really nice seat. You can always transfer it to a better bike or something, and if you want to sell, say, a older bike, you can just buy a cheaper vinyl seat for it. But same thing with the pedals. I took these pedals off that other bike, got the bowel cages there. Like I said, the only thing I have to do yet is I have to take this preservative off, and it's it might be a messy job, so I'm not going to do it inside here. I clean the chain, and then you put a lubricant like this, kind of all, I usually use an all-weather type lubricant. And then lubricate the pivots, usually with something like a spray lubricant, the pivots of the front and the rear derailleurs. And then I'll do my road testing. I'll calibrate, you know, the shifting as I'm riding, and the brakes. As you can see, brakes are set up pretty well. But it turned out really nice, looks really nice, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. And like I said, this is my latest project. Got a couple other projects, but I might put those on hold. I got some other things to do. I don't like, although this little work area worked out really nice here in my, this is kind of like my media room here in my apartment. So probably I'll make another video that I'll do in full high definition, unconverted or unedited, and I'll call it Schwinn 87 Schwinn Paramount Rebuilt Restored. So once again, thanks for watching, and whatever you do, ride safe, and I hope to see you again here real soon. Bye for now.